News reports say Mr. Tsongas will suspend his White House bid due in large part to a lack of money.
As I started to say, Susan, most of the people that we have talked with, especially the underlings who were with him from early on, were absolutely stunned that the senator would bow out. Yesterday, he apparently made the decision. He spent the night in Lowell last night, and since then, it's become obvious. I think tired is fair. We were told by Ed Jesser in particular this morning that he is feeling great. But Jesser seemed to jump at that question a little bit. Someone said, how's he feeling? How's he been doing? He said he's feeling great. And I think he went on to say, after all, you got to remember, he's the only one here that is certain he doesn't have cancer. But I thought he fielded that question a little quickly, not indicating that he's ill, but that he is tired. He looks very tired. Anyone who's been through what he's been through would be tired. But he also looks like he's at peace with the decision. I thought he looked that way when he arrived at the hotel earlier. He was dressed in his shirt out in the snow without a jacket, but he seemed at peace. And here now is the senator, as you can see, taking the podium.
This is so typical of the campaign. We have love on both sides and guerrilla warfare among the press. It had been my intention to make only one announcement today, but because of a phone call that came in an hour ago, I have two to make. One is that I will suspend my candidacy for President of the United States, and because of the second phone call, I am pleased to announce that I've agreed to accept the presidency of the Speedo Bathing Suit Company. And I'm serious. You finished? A year ago, you and I began our journey of purpose. We undertook this journey out of love of country. America faces economic peril and social disharmony. That is not what America is all about. America is a great nation, and we are a great people, and we must be called to that greatness. This journey had two missions. The first was to redefine the Democratic Party, to combine economic growth with our traditional social compassion. America needs such a Democratic Party. I believe the force of our message and our shared survival has caused people all over this country to see a new path. It is a steeper and harder path, but it is more compelling and more noble. It is the path of America's future. At the end of that path lies a prosperous and humane America. More importantly, it is the path of our generational responsibility. Our young deserve our willingness to make hard choices. Their fate lies in our resolve. To turn away from that sacred responsibility is to violate the legacy of our ancestors. That message, that sacredness, that resolve was my mission. And I feel deeply fulfilled. The obligation of my survival has been met. The second mission was to secure the nomination, take the party and take the fight to George Bush. I believe that I could have brought in independents and moderate and disaffected Republicans to combine with traditional Democrats and become President of the United States. But the hard fact is that the nomination process requires resources. And last evening it was clear that we did not have the resources necessary to fight the media war in New York. We simply did not have the resources. I would have been defined by others and have been unable to defend myself. Worse, my message would have been wounded, and all that we worked for this past year would have been put at risk. The message must endure. At times, we are under great pressure to change our views to accommodate various interests. I chose not to. My principles could not have been compromised without destroying that message. Those decisions cost us dearly, and the resources simply were not there to make up the difference, and thus today's announcement to suspend the campaign. The alternative was clear. The alternative was to play the role of spoiler. That is not what I'm about. That is not worthy. I did not survive my ordeals in order to be the agent of the re-election of George Bush. My task is to pay homage to principles. In the larger sense, it is our collective, you and me, our collective commitment to a set of values. That is what will endure. We stood for something. We stood for something. And that is what I want you to take away with you. What you worked for, all the hours, all the agonies, all the sacrifice, that was what this was about. Your dedication moves me deeply. You live in my soul. We are part of a larger force, and we have served our country. My heart is hopeful for America. I congratulate Bill Clinton and Jerry Brown. I look forward to the convention, and I look forward to a Democratic victory in November. It's been a hell of a ride. It's been a hell of a ride. And what I'd like to do at this point is to introduce two people to sort of represent those who served us so well. And first, my campaign manager going back to 74 and 78, and my best friend, Dennis Cannon. What he could have done if he just had the money. And secondly, when I would think during this, when it was clear we had a real chance here, and I would think about, well, what happens if I did not win? I had feelings on both sides of that in terms of family and so forth. But the one regret that will always sort of pain me is that this country would never have a first lady named Nikki.
of you who know me well, followed me during the campaign, know that the cat only catches my tongue when I'm with Paul. Otherwise, I have much to say, but I'd have to say this has probably been the most wonderful experience of my life. You're remarkable people. You all, I think of anything it said, what this campaign is said about all of you is how much you love your country. And I think that's a remarkable testament to the kind of people that this country produces. And I just want to thank you all very much for making it possible. It would not have been possible one day without all of you, and we will never forget it. Thank you very much.
Who would have thought a year ago when we began that we'd stand up here today, Nikki would be more articulate than I am and get a better round of applause. I am resentful. I'd also like to Thalia campaign across the country, did a heck of a job, and Nikki's sisters, my sister Vicky, my brother-in-law Jim, Ashley, Katina, and Molly. It was a family affair, and we're proud of what we did. My final comment, and I can say this now that we are suspending that, you can trust my word. I'd like to say a word to the press. Gasp. And that is that, as happened in my prior life, I've gotten to know members of the press, and I have a great respect for them. The fact is that there are a lot of cynics in the group, but it's a cynicism born of idealism. And as bad as they may be, the fact is this country would be devastated without them. And the people I've met in the press, I've enjoyed. Some of them hopefully have become friends. I just want to express my enormous respect. Didn't like everything they wrote and moaned and groaned about some of it, but in the last analysis, we are blessed. I don't say that casually, and there's no self-interest at this point in making that comment, but absent the vigilance of the press, there would be no America. And that is the wonder of what our founding fathers put together. Now, if the founding fathers had thought about this group, well, maybe they would have had a different mechanism, but anyway, we are, so as a citizen, I feel comforted by the fact that you all are out there and protecting this country as well. So I never thought I'd say that, but that's how I feel. Okay, why don't we let you inquire.
What is the distinction you make, if any, using the word suspending your campaign?
The reason I'm using the word suspension is that we have delegates who wish to go to the convention, and by suspending the campaign, they're intact and they can go. And we've got a number of calls urging us, pleading with us to do that, and so that's why we're doing that.
Senator, you said earlier yesterday that the problem was not money, that you had plenty of money to go on. What changed in the last 24 hours?
The problem was not money coming in. The money was coming in. I mean, the amount of money coming in, as the numbers I think you're familiar with, 300,000 in February, 300,000 in January. I will say, this is totally aside, I can now wander freely. But I'd like to apologize for 3 remarks I made during the campaign. One, Molly is in the 4th grade, not the 5th grade. The second is I have 3 children, not 4. And the other thing I said the other day was I got cancer at the age of 38, not 42. So let me gotten all those things straight. This campaign was lost in 1991 because of the lack of resources. It was almost rescued in 1992 by the message. We came into 1992 without any money and in debt. So the 300,000 that came in January, the 1.4 million that came in February, and the 1.4 we've raised already in March, I mean, that was wonderful. But the problem is we were starved. And if money is the mother's milk of politics, our mothers didn't show up until late January. And so what happened was we had no reserves. As we then moved into the States with all the media buzz, what we were bringing in was fine, but there was no reserves to play. And what we found out in Texas, Florida, Michigan, and Illinois was the fact that if someone goes on television and defines you, and you have no capacity to respond, people's impression of you is not what you are, but what you were defined by your opponent. And it was obvious that to go into New York, defenseless in terms of financial resources, being unable to get up on the air in the Buffaloes, Schenectadys, etc., would have meant that we could not compete. And the danger was, and the great agony was that the message, if I had gone down in that way, that the message would have been so damaged that all that we have endured for would have been hurt. So I have no complaints about what was coming in the last month or so. What affected us was not having the capacity to organize, to do things back last year, and to come into 1992 basically in a state of poverty.
Senator, have you spoken to Governor Clinton yet?
I've spoken to all of the other 5 candidates. Bob Kerry was in Disney World. I told him I would be there too at 3 o'clock. You can decide who's goofy. I will not be grumpy, though, I'll tell you. We had a conversation. We agreed to get together. There was no discussion of anything beyond that. And I must say it's interesting to talk to people you've done battle with. And those who have stepped out, there's a sense of brotherhood. And I think I've made some good friends along the way.
What about the message against the television? The idea that you were the anti-candidate, the non-candidate, without this charisma that's required in American politics today.
Are you worried that it was your message or that you didn't have charisma, or to what extent do you think it was either?
There's no accounting for our success absent the message. I'm not the most telegenic and charismatic character that ever came down the road, but people believe me. And it was the message that people responded to. The fact is, when I got into this race, you all wrote me off. I was not even a first-tier candidate, despite the message. So we had to overcome not only the inertia, but the fact is we were not treated seriously by those who have a capacity to affect opinions in this country. So how did we overcome that? Without money, we overcame it because the message has power, that there's a vision that people can be attracted to. And part of those of you who followed us saw in Ann Arbor and in Northwestern and the parade in Chicago is that people do respond to beliefs. And that was what gave us great hope. But the fact is that when you look at those 4, we won the small states when it was even. But you go into the large states where you cannot reach that many people, and the impression of you is defined by the TV buys, and you are defenseless in that war, it has its inevitable consequences, and that was the price we paid for not having the resources backed up in the end of 1991 and January of 1992.
Do you accept the fact now that Governor Clinton will be the Democratic nominee?
I think he's certainly in the driver's seat by any definition of that term. I congratulate him. I did today. I said, Bill, been in this business a long time. You're the only person ever defeated me, and my hat's off to you. Let me respond to a feminine voice.
Senator, given your support? Did you tell him you'll be supporting him now?
I'm not going to support anybody. I was very grateful when the others decided to step down and not endorse, and I think I owe the two candidates a similar courtesy. I'm going to answer feminine voices since I can't see you all until we're even. I don't mean conflicting feminine voices.
From the National Democratic Party leader to step aside.
Did I get any pressure from the National Democratic leaders to step aside? I sure did. A year ago. In a more direct answer to your question, certainly not in the last 9 or 10 months. They've been actually rather astonished at what we've done, and I think they must go home tonight and wonder, how did he do it? The fact is that the Democratic message, unless changed, will lead to defeat in November. And what we have done is to demonstrate, okay, folks, you've got good IQs. Here's the path. Take the path and you can win. Stay on the old path because it's more comfortable and you'll lose again and George Bush will be reelected. It's not difficult. Two paths. We have pointed out the way despite them. And now we call upon them for their own country's sake. Make some changes, make some redefinition. Understand that when people are not working, they're hurting. And that back to my rhetoric again. One boat. Let me rephrase that. One navigational system that is inclusive, not exclusive. You can see why that never worked, why it did. One boat, everybody's in, nobody's out. And that sense of economic growth and reaching out to the business community, taking all your resources and building the manufacturing base, that's not rhetoric. That is humanity. That's fairness. And for the Democratic Party to embrace things like the middle-class tax cut, because that's what the polling data suggested, is why they're in trouble. It's why we did well, because we stood for something. We didn't start off this campaign. That's why after this campaign began, I expanded my inclusion of capital punishment to include pollsters and media consultants, and I reaffirmed that today. Yes.
How are you ruling out a number 2 spot on the Democratic ticket, and what sort of role do you envision for yourself in the remainder of the 92 race?
I'll respond to any male voice I hear. I promised the group last night after we met that I would make no statements on my future, that I would keep my views to myself, let things settle down, and I will honor that commitment. But I will be a player because I am now the message that people have responded to. We did not have the resources, we have the message, and it's my job to make sure a Democrat wins in November, and I'm committed to that. I hear another feminine voice. You'll have to wait.
Senator, last weekend you suggested that under no circumstances would you accept the vice presidential slot. Now you seem to be backing away from that. Can you be more definitive? Is it yes or no?
Here I'm trying to be feminist, right? And this thing keeps on coming back. I made a commitment last night, and the people I made the commitment to I live with. I don't live with you. And, Let me say, if that was unnecessarily a comeback, I semi-apologize. Okay, I've had enough of. Let's go back to my side of the genetic aisle.
Envision your candidacy being revived.
As I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, we will be on all the ballots that remain, but I don't see that would come back. I mean, the fact is you've got a front runner, you've got a second candidate, and if I thought that the resources were there to take this into the major media states, I would have done it. But those resources simply were not there last year.
What do you say to the people who plan to vote for you in those primaries?
Why not? And I had not thought about it, but it is an intriguing notion. I thank you for bringing it up. Yeah.
You being the only reasonable alternative to Bill Clinton. Now that alternative is Jerry Brown. What do you feel that does to the Democratic dynamic in the race? If Bill Clinton were to stumble somewhere along the way, if there were any new revelations, the alternative is Jerry Brown. Do you think that's an acceptable alternative?
Is there anything else besides a male or female alternative here in this? Give Jerry Brown credit. I spoke with him today. If I had money problems, he's had money problems. But he has an 800 number, so he has a certain advantage. And you have to give credit to someone like that, and I do. And we'll see how his message evolves now that I'm not in this race. I agreed to sit down with him as well, and that will take place. It certainly, in his case, I would think California must be a very enticing possibility.
Is there anything said about Governor Clinton you regret now during the course of the campaign?
This is not a day for regrets. I've been in a lot of battles, and I've fought good friends, and afterwards we've been friends again. But I feel good tonight. I felt lousy last night, to tell you the truth. And it was very emotional to tell all these people about my decision. But I must say, I've spoken to so many people around the country today, and what we've done will last. And I don't think you can say that about everybody who's run. So in that sense, there is and I will admit to a great sense of relief. The fact is that half of the young men in my campaign have fallen in love with my wife. I find that a great threat, and now we can get rid of them. And
Sir, do you think Bill Clinton could defeat George Bush if the election were held tomorrow, or do you think Bill Clinton needs to radically reshape his message?
I would rather talk about Paul Tsongas today, if you don't mind. I mean, clearly, I think that if I was always criticized or analyzed in the sense of not being as strong as I should have been among traditional Democratic constituencies. But the fact is, where I did the best was not only a certain part of the Democratic Party, but independents and Republicans. That's how you win. And to the extent that you ignore that constituency and say, well, you're not part of my group, you are dooming yourself to defeat in November. So it is my hope that there will be some movement in terms of positions that will say to those people, yes, you can trust us with the economy. It's not more of the same Democratic approach. And that's how you win. George Bush is vulnerable. I can tell you that I've been out there among Republicans, and what they object to is a lack of a set of principles. What does this man stand for? It's not just the economic decline, but a sense that the core value system is very narrow. And people find that objectionable in a president. Let me take one more. Yes. I can't see through the lights, so you're going to have to presume I'm looking at you.
Senator, I want to ask you about, from somebody who almost made it back to California and didn't, can you tell us about Florida? Do you think that your problems had to do with your attacks on Clinton because you're not particularly comfortable with that kind of campaigning? That's question number one. Question number two, do you have any predictions for the Masters race?
the Masters race. Swim race.
I'm not going to come in second. I'll tell you that in the Masters swim race. Probably come in sixth. The reason I dropped out of this race was because at the way I was going, I would not have been competitive at the National Swimming Championships. And so this is just an attempt to get back to training that really counts. So, I think what happened, if you go back and look at this campaign, New Hampshire, we all spent a lot of time. They got to know us all. People were given the book, and the issues were debated. We won, despite issues of electability and despite being written off, all of that kind of thing. Then we go into Maryland, Washington State, Utah, Arizona, we win. When you get into the large states, where media buys have impact, what happened in Florida, as you know, Texas. Well, let me use Texas as an example. In Texas, you had Bill Clinton standing in mine, start off at 3, and we just kept on going up. And then the media buys kicked in, and bang. And that's the reality I had to face last night, that in New York, I would run into the same thing, that as we did well, and the media buys kicked in, and we had no capacity to respond, the same thing would happen. And leave me out, the message would have been hurt in the process. So at 9:30 last night, I talked about hard choices and fiscal responsibility. Well, I had that choice last night. It's not easy getting out because we believe in what we stand for. This was purpose. It was not ambition. But the fact is that's the reality that confronts me. That is the choice that I had to make. And I can't go around this country asking Americans to make difficult, hard choices if I'm in a position where I am unable to do it for my own campaign. So let me... And as further proof of that axiom, look at Illinois. Before we went into Illinois, the numbers were something like 31-26, and then his media kicked in, and we got blown away. And we picked up 6 or 7 points at the end when we did our debates and campaigning in our media. But the fact is you cannot go into major media states without resources and expect that somehow by divine intervention the truth about you will be known. And you are defined under those circumstances, and 'tis better, if that is the harsh reality, to recognize that and then step back and ask yourself the question, how do we safeguard the message? The message is our keeping. How do we fulfill that obligation? And thus the very painful decision last night to simply suspend the campaign. I will finish, if I might, by saying to all of you that I hope that you are satisfied in your soul with what we've done. I'd like to thank all those who contributed. There are about, 30,000 people who contributed to this campaign. I'd like to thank all those who worked for us around the country. And finally, I'd like to, again, thank the press for the safeguard role that they play. Because the fact is, politicians are politicians. And this country can only survive if there is checks and balances, and that is the role that the press must play. As I said, I was not always pleased with what was written about my candidacy and our prospects, etc., but I think on balance they were very fair, and I'm very grateful to have been treated with that objectivity. So, the year is over. It was, today's what, the 19th? 1 year and 12 days, a great adventure. A great adventure. This is the big leagues. This is where you affect your country. And this 1 year and 12 days, I think we've done more than all the other years I put into public service, and I'm proud to have been an American. Thank you.
And so former Senator Paul Tsongas suspends his campaign for the presidency. We're back live from Washington. Our phone lines are open. We'd like to hear what you think about what you just heard. Those of you who just joined us or saw only a portion of it, about 40 minutes ago, former Senator Tsongas announced that he was suspending his campaign.